Welcome back to another episode of the Brew and Ink podcast. This is season 3.
All right, well, welcome back to another Brew and Ink podcast. This is season 3, episode
Yes, it is.
dos. That's for our Spanish audience
Yes.
out there. We're doing the murder mystery, and this has been a blast so far. We have had so much fun putting this
Yeah,
together.
and speaking of a blast, my character got put on blast in the votes. You know, they really wanted to look into that bartender there around the poisoning, but yeah, I was happy to write it.
Yeah, it was good. So, Stephen, I don't know if that's a really winning, but the vote went to the vote went to Stephen.
I was the sketchiest, apparently.
He was the sketchiest. Well, it's being French. I mean, you can't really.
Cousteau.
There's a lot of good.
Cousteau on a ship.
On a ship.
There's a lot of good French jokes out there, right? What do you call a million men with their hands in the air? The French army.
Just lost one vote.
Just lost one. We lost one audience member with that there. No, so anyway, this has been really fun, and tonight we have Katie,
Hello.
we have Evie,
Hey.
we have Bill,
Hello.
and we have Steven, and
here.
myself, Britt Mooney, obviously, as you can see from the podcast. And so we're going to get into our topic. And tonight we're going to talk about conflict. How do you create conflict?
Well, before you go on,
Oh.
I want to stop you right there.
Oh, sorry.
See, that's how you create conflict.
You
But
interrupt.
I do have something.
Ooh,
A promise trophy
Oh,
for Katie, and
so
for those of
cute.
you that can't see, it's about an inch and a half tall, maybe 2 inches tall.
2 inches, yeah, it's about 2 inches.
And yeah, and it's she earned it for writing the best short
wow.
story slash
That
fiction.
deserves it.
Yeah,
That
So we got a short trophy. I get it.
Thanks, Steven.
you're welcome.
That's like baby size, so the baby can
Yeah.
have that.
Your baby's coming out a winner.
Thanks.
So we're going to be talking about conflict on this episode, and how do we create conflict? So basically, we've all either read the stories or we've watched the movies where you get into it and you start realizing like nothing's happened. Like there's nothing going on, and it even became like a joke for Seinfeld, right? Like it's a
Right.
show about nothing. Well, you can't be about nothing, and it's kind of the joke, right? There's got to be conflict. There's got to be a situation that brings out some level of conflict for characters to work through and all that kind of stuff. And so as writers, how do we do that? What are some ways that we as I like to say, or I heard somewhere, you put the character up in a tree and you start throwing rocks at him or her. You just keep making the situation more and more dire as the story goes on until they're forced to make big life kind of decisions. And that's what people generally like to kind of deal with. So how do we do that? Stephen, what do you think? How do you
Well,
get it to conflict?
when you're talking about throwing rocks, a great example that comes to my head is in The Hobbit when they're being chased by these orcs already, and then they climb up into the trees, and then the trees get lit on fire. And so it's like, not only are they being chased,
Right.
but now, okay, they're kind of getting away, but they're in a dangerous spot. And then now that thing that was supposed to be a safe haven is also a danger unto their survival as well. But that's just like one classic example. For myself, the conflict comes to me, I like to have it build in layers. So I like it when it's not just one character that's dealing with the conflict, but like that character's conflict is maybe causing another character's conflict, which is maybe layered over or crossed over somehow, between their opposing goals. And a lot of times that's what we find. And we talked about this before on the podcast is, what makes a good villain? Someone that has opposing goals to your hero. And that's really a great way to build conflict, just within the characters.
Well, there are a couple, what do they call staple conflicts, right? There's person against person, they call man against man, man against the world or society, man against nature, right? I mean, there's kind of those staples, but
Scott Pilgrim versus the world.
Scott Pilgrim versus the world. So there are kind of some basic ones that you kind of fall into, like man against himself. You know, there's like the inner struggle kind of thing. Katie, what about you? What are some ways that you like to create conflict?
One thing I always keep in mind from a character's perspective or in developing a character is first, what are their needs and what are their goals, their wants and desires? What a character needs to overcome internally in order to achieve a goal, and then developing the conflicts around that. So what's keeping the character from that goal? I do a lot of role playing, and one of my favorite aspects with that is world building on the fly. And so these stories I'm writing tend to be fairly short, but I can pull in lots of exterior conflict with just through world building. So if you've got a system of magic or something, how does that relate? What are the deeper implications of that, and politically, socially, economically, and that can add a lot of detail. Another thing is Jim Butcher. The way he develops conflicts is he asks questions. So each scene has a purpose and a question it asks. There's the conflict of does the character succeed in this, and then there's a variety of answers that can be given. And the boring ones are either yes or no. The character succeeds, yes, well, great. But it gets more interesting when you add like a yes, but, or a no, and furthermore.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when you can incorporate the world aspect of it into being part of the conflict, that adds a lot more genuine believability to it, rather than it just being like, oh, these characters are set up to not like each other, sort of thing.
Yeah, it almost sucks you into the story.
Right.
You kind of can picture yourself there.
What about you, Evie?
Well, I'm a lot on in agreement with Katie. For me, being a TCK, a third culture kid, one of the biggest things I love to mess with is cultural differences, where someone doesn't realize that that's not a conflict for them. And when a lot of times you have culture clashes, it's kind of fun to watch. Something that's not normally a conflict for them becomes a massive conflict because the other person just can't understand. Like, why would you do that? Like, why would you be okay with that? Well, I grew up this way. And so I love adding, that kind of the, I can't understand you, but I have to put up with you. Because a lot of times I can add, like, quirks into it. And I like to add, like, not necessarily resolution, but instead coping skills, which then usually lead to more conflict.
Those can be really difficult to write about because it takes a lot more thought and more understanding to get to a place where with a cultural conflict you have to understand what that conflict is first in order to write about it.
And I love especially like Call of Duty in the sense of like a lot of times the most irrational things come from I have to. Because this is what we do. This is the right thing to do. And I found that in cultures, that's probably the biggest change is what I think is absolutely 100% solid, black and white. I have to do this. This is the law. This is how this works. Is so not for another culture. And so in my book right now, I have these nuns that are putting themselves in mass amount of danger, getting hurt every day. They're walking into it knowing they're going to get hurt, and they will not leave. And she's sitting there going, why won't you just leave? She says, because we said we would be here. Because we said we wouldn't leave.
Yeah, I feel like that's a big play in the Punisher series that was on Netflix, is that he has to protect these women and children because that's his duty.
Yeah.
He serves and protects, and that's
he's
kind of what's
able
his
and
driving
nobody
force.
else is there that is. And
Exactly.
That
And he's-
generates the conflict.
That pulls him into conflict.
It pulls him into the conflict. The conflict's
Yeah.
already there in
Yeah.
that case. But
Yeah. What about you, Bill?
yeah, a lot of people said a lot of things, and I'm sitting here. I'm a little lost because I think of it a little differently. I don't think of the specific things that cause the conflict. What I think of is how the conflict has to be there. And when I go back and everybody's read a book or watched a movie or something, and you had the happy scene, and you just said, nothing because it didn't affect you. It had zero effect on you. And you may have gone back and analyzed it and said, this movie had these happy scenes, and that's what made it so boring. The same with the book. And for me, that idea that you're writing and you have these moments where there's no conflict is anathema, because when I read that, something that I've written that has that, it kills me. I'm like, that's got to go, or I have to destroy that and make it into a conflict. And sometimes I don't see right away. Sometimes it takes till the third or fourth or fifth draft before I see that's the real problem. I don't have a conflict here. You know, every scene has to be a conflict. Every scene has to be, that part of the story that has some anger or conflict to it. And there's one thing somebody told me years ago that has really stuck with me, and it helps a lot for generating conflict because almost all conflicts are interpersonal. I mean, you do have man versus nature. That's very personal. I mean,
Absolutely.
especially to the man who's trying to survive.
Yeah.
But anger is unmet expectation is what this guy told me one time, and that makes it for me. If I can't make it, if I absolutely have to have the scene, and a lot of times the scene just gets cut because it doesn't belong. It's a happy scene. It doesn't belong. Yeah. It's not. There's no conflict there.
With happy scenes, one thing. I forget who I read it from, but happy scenes and points of joy and rest have to be earned. So you can't just have, everything's happy because that's just how it is. Especially in the middle of the story or toward the end, that has to be fought for.
Yeah. And I'd rather put those things at the start of a chapter or somewhere, but definitely you don't end a section of your reading. You don't end on that happy note because at least to me you're not leaving the people a reason to keep going.
Yeah.
It's all resolved. There's nothing wrong here. There's nothing to see, people. Just move along.
Yeah. I mean, once the character doesn't have anything to fight for anymore, then the story's over. That's really that's when the story's over.
And that's why when I say the anger is unmet expectation helps out, because suddenly it doesn't matter what culture somebody is. If George, my lead character, is expecting something out of this guy at the 7-Eleven and he doesn't get it, he's going to be angry or there's conflict. Yeah. If that guy is expecting exact change or whatever and he doesn't get it, there's going to be conflict.
Exactly.
You don't necessarily, I get where you're coming from on the cultural thing and all, but you don't necessarily have to explain all the cultural things. You don't even have to tell people it is cultural, just that there's a conflict here, and let people imagine it. If they want to decide, that guy must be from here. Let them.
Well, I think that good stories do have a lot of those layers. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, I was just thinking of Star Wars, right? I mean, you got Star Wars where you've got man against the world, right? There's the evil empire. There's you've got that sort of world building kind of conflict. Right. But then you've also got his inner conflict of, his call to be the hero, and right. I mean, there's all these little conflicts that go on, and then there's the forced situation with Han Solo and Chewbacca, right? And then there's conflict there. Oh, Flyboy, and you don't believe in the Force, do you? I mean, there's all these the conflicts that happen, and now we throw the princess in there, and now there's even more conflict interpersonally while they're on this goal together. And like I'm saying, there's all these different levels of conflict that are bigger than just. I think most stories have several of those because I don't think you can just do one. You can, but usually that's like a scene or a short story or something like that. I think to do a novel length. Gone with the Wind. I mean, all the different conflicts. Is the Civil War going on? There's, there's her personal thing with who she loves, and then there's all these different conflicts that go on, whether by her own choices or she's just does something stupid, or I'm just saying, like, there's any great, to me, novel was going to have a lot of those layers of it. Or else, I think you're right. Who said it? Like, it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel genuine if there's just one sort of kind of conflict. Like, we all feel all those kind of conflicts, right?
Right.
It takes really good writing at the same time to take all those layers and have your character come out the other end of the story with something really simple that had to change. And I think that's why we get bad writing sometimes, right? It's like, that's the thing that bothers me about The Walking Dead. Every time you need to interrupt something, there's zombies show up. Like it's kind of lazy writing sometimes because they're
cheating.
like, oh well, it's been about a minute of just talking, so we gotta change zombies, and that's not all the time.
But where it gets tricky is when the character never makes the choice and stays the same. And a static character is one that might face conflict, but never resolves it, never makes a decision, never makes the conscious choice to do something different or be something different. And that's something to consider in your own writing and to make sure that you're addressing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard for us to root for a character who things just happen to her, right? I mean, we can empathize or sympathize maybe with that character, but to really root for somebody, you have to think, man, they're fighting against the impossible, right? I mean, like whatever that is, that's part of the fantasy of why we love the big story, why we love that. We love the idea that I'm not powerless against the conflicts in my life. And when sometimes we have those very passive characters, I agree, by the end of the series, I didn't care what happened to Katniss or anybody. I just didn't care because it was all about what was happening to her. It wasn't about, and she was being forced to do things. It wasn't like her deciding, you know what?
No character arc whatsoever.
Yeah, there was not really a character arc. It was just, I guess I got to do this now. I mean, like, it was just kind of weird the way it happened. And there was some cool world building and there's some cool stuff, but yeah, I totally agree. Speaking of conflict, there's been a murder.
A murder?
A murder on a cruise ship, and it might have been the bartender. And so we're going to get the interview with your character. What's your character's name again?
Henri Custeau.
Henri Custeau.
Henri Custeau.
And with a very legit French accent, I'm sure.
Oui, oui.
So Stephen wrote this episode. He wrote this part of the story, the interview with Henri Custeau, and so we'll have that next. Here we go.
We just want to say thanks for listening to our podcast. If you are interested in learning more about writing and how to become a writer, check out our syndication page, seriouswriter.com. They have articles, resources, classes, videos, and a podcast, the Brew and Ink Podcast. Again, check out seriouswriter.com. Thanks for listening.
The midnight showing, The Bartender's Tale. The show started just like every other night, with a smattering of forced laughter and a few jokes that fell flat. Being French-Canadian, I do not get most of the jokes Blake Shelton tells anyways, but then again, it seems neither do most of the nightly crowds. The first round of drinks had been consumed, and the server had come back with a second round of orders. This is when the heckling began. I could see it was getting under Blake's skin. He has this tic that gives him away. He begins to clear his throat in between pauses when nervous or worked up.
And how do you know about this tic? Are you often around Mr. Sheldon when he is upset?
We spend time together gambling. His tic is horrible for poker. A few times a week, Blake and I visit the casinos. My game of choice is blackjack. Not very big payouts, but higher chance of winning. Blake is more of a craps player. What can I say? He likes his games like he likes his jokes.
Interesting. It was my understanding that crew weren't allowed to gamble while working aboard their ship.
Oui, that is true. We are not allowed to gamble ourselves.
So then which is it? You guys gamble together or not?
Oh, what does it matter? You just wanted to know how I know Blake? I have told you. Dr. Wolf, eyeing me up and down, began to make me uncomfortable. This man does not miss a detail. I must be more careful.
No, I am curious now. How is it that you two get away with gambling while also being crew without someone recognizing you?
I will tell you how we do this thing, so that you can see I am being truthful with you when I say I did not murder this man. We use a patsy, someone who follows our signals to bet or fold. They get a cut of the payoffs without having to risk their own money. Blake and I rotate nights. We pool our winnings together to afford the higher payout tables.
Wait,
Dr. Wolf halted my story with an upraised hand.
you guys put your winnings together? How do you decide who gets what?
I looked at Dr. Wolf with a raised eyebrow. We split 50-50 at the end of each night. Last night was not a good night because of that man there, and now he is dead and we cannot get our money back from him.
Hold on, so you had a run-in with the deceased last night? Very interesting.
Merde, I thought to myself as Dr. Wolf scribbles down some notes. Why did I say that? He was my patsy last night, but I did not kill this man, I swear it. Dr. Wolf looked very interested now. He sits back more comfortably in his seat and listens as I continue. Sacre bleu. Bon. Last night, I went to find a patsy, and I see Aaron wandering around the casino looking for a game to play. I could see he was too scared to sit down at any one of them, so I approached him and offered him the deal. He was a bit hesitant at first, but I told him it was a win-win for him. He gets the experience of playing the games without using any of his money. Everything was set to go well until I quickly realized that Aaron was, je ne sais quoi, an idiot. I would tell him to bet high and he would fold. I would tell him to hit and he would stay. I figured he did not understand the signal, so I pulled him aside and asked him if he was clear on what to do. Dismissing me, he said, "Frenchie, I know what I'm doing. I got a good feeling about this hand." I say, "First, I am French Canadian. Second, if you do not follow my signals and lose me my money, you get nothing. Comprenez-vous?" "No, I don't comprende. You promised to pay out if I played for you, and that's what I'm doing. All you have done so far is lose me my money by following your feelings. You only get money from a portion of your winnings, which is 0 at this moment." Well, he huffed back and played a few more hands and won a couple following my lead, then cashed out before I instructed him to. I had to hunt him down to get my money back. When I found him, he says he doesn't have it. "Pardon-moi? You lost over $2,000? Then he blackmails me and says if I threaten him, he will tell my superiors about my little scheme.
So he stole $2,000 from you?
No, 1,000 from me, and the other half was Blake's 1,000.
Okay, go on. What did you do then?
When I told Blake about what had happened the next morning, he was furious, saying that was weeks' worth of work I lost in one night, and how could I be so foolish to pick an idiot like that? Tabitha was sitting close by. She is Blake's groupie. Apparently, she follows him around to all his shows. I think the two have a secret love affair that they hide for some reason. N'importe quoi. Well, she comes over and says,
I can get Aaron to your show tonight, so the two of you can talk to him after everyone leaves.
I have been around Tabitha enough times to know that her schemes do not usually go as planned. She is not, je ne sais quoi, brilliant. I advised Blake away from getting her involved, but in the end, it seems she took it upon herself, as the buffoon ended up coming to the show with her. When he began to heckle Blake, though, I could see he had crossed a line with her. Her body language looked intent on making Aaron shut up. There was murder in her eyes, that one. At the time, I was making a second round of drinks when Mr. Tall, Dark, and Handsome walked in and ordered a Hudson baby. Dr. Wolf begins choking when he realizes it was him I was talking about. Seeing a break in the conversation, Tabitha and Blake came over to cut in.
Are you two almost done?
Tabitha asked Dr. Wolf while shooting me a mistrusting glance. Blake piled on.
Yeah, we got 3 other people that still need to be interviewed, and it's getting late here.
All right, we are close to wrapping up here. Mr. Custeau is just getting to the important parts. Please take a seat and wait for me to call you over.
As they walk away, Dr. Wolf clears his throat and turned back to me.
You were saying?
Where was I? Ah, yes, the handsome brooding man at the bar. When you ordered a Hudson Baby, I knew you were of a different sort than our regular crowd. I finished making the others' drinks and left them on the counter for the server to pick up. As I was getting the things for your drink, that lady, Abigail, I think her name is, she came over to get the drinks from the table. Remember, you had to help hand her the glasses as I was on the other end of the bar, getting a proper bourbon glass for you. The server came over and scolded the both of you for improper procedure and that you could get her fired. Then you came back and started reading your book. I attempted to strike up a conversation with you, but you merely gave me curt one-word responses. Your attention was elsewhere. Not much longer after that, the man was choking and spewing the vilest mess I've ever seen. And then, voila, just like that, he was dead, and now we are here. So you see, I am innocent. I made the drinks the proper way. You were sitting at the bar when I did so. You had to have seen I did nothing improper to the drinks. If anything, it must have been Tabitha who tampered with the drinks after it was brought to the table. I saw a nefarious look she gave our own. I do not think it was the other lady, Abigail. She has nothing to do with our little problem. I do not know why she was here tonight, other than to genuinely be entertained. Dr. Wolf sat there in silence for a bit, mulling over my words and scribbling down notes in his pad. Then, without any reassurance or indication that I was no longer a suspect, he nodded to me and said,
Thank you. You may go sit back with the others. I've taken into account everything you have told me. You've definitely given me a lot to work with here. Merci. Do tell the others to give me a moment to decide who I want to talk to next.
As I walked back, Tabitha gave me a hard stare, and Blake just cleared his throat without saying anything. Abigail spoke up first.
Well, what does he think? Who does he want to talk to next?
All right, so there we have it. That is the bartender's tale. I feel like we're in the Canterbury Tales here for a second.
That's fun.
And so that was his story. So there's some sort of money issue going on, and it sounds like there's a lot of shady stuff going on. With
Shady
this guy.
stuff. There's some run-ins the night
There's
before.
some run-ins the night before.
And I do apologize if it's hard to understand any part of that because of my outrageous French accent.
Yeah, it's fairly outrageous. So next, we need to decide who's going to get the next interview. Who is Dr. Wolf going to interview next to try to figure out who did this dastardly deed?
Yes.
And so
Dirty
who are
deeds.
our choices? We've got the drama queen,
Yes, Abigail,
Abigail.
who, was kind of, from the bartender side, was like, she's not a part of this. I've never seen her before.
Yeah, she doesn't have anything to do with this. Why would she have done this?
Yeah.
Right? And then we also have the number one fan,
Tabitha, who
Tabitha.
was very heavily implicated by
Inclinated.
the bartender. Inclinated,
or acclimated.
acclimated. She was getting adjusted to the whole scene.
Look, we're writers, people. We're good at this. I swear.
I words a lot, okay?
So we've got the number one fan, top heavy Tabitha, and who else do we have?
And we have the comedian, Blake.
Bozo Blake. Got
Yo,
it.
whoa. Where are you going with that, huh?
You got
He-
Smarty pants over there.
He was not
That's low, guys.
Oh, wait.
he was not very happy to have lost $1,000, I'm sure of it.
No, $1,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a lot of
Can you
money.
afford it? No, no.
I don't know.
Your jokes aren't that.
It's a lot of tequila.
You just don't be surprised if the bartender ends up the next one poisoned, okay?
Well, never know. Never know. All right, so those are our choices. So we've gone through the bartender, Henri / Steven. And we have 3 choices. We've got Blake, which will be written by Bill. We've got Abigail, which will be written by Evie. We've got Katie, who would write Tabitha, if those are the choices. Now, Tabitha was a close second
Yeah.
in the voting.
In the voting.
So we'll see how all this new information kind of affects the vote as we move forward here.
Now that the bartender has thrown her under the bus.
Under the bus.
Under the boat.
Under the boat, right?
Keel hauled her.
So go and vote on our website, www.brewandinc, all spelled out, .com. Not the all spelled out part, just the brewandinc.com. And go to our website, go to our Facebook page. Listen. After you listen here, just go vote and like it, share it, rate it, do all that stuff to support us. We'd really appreciate it. And we got a lot of stuff coming up, and we'll be talking about that over the next few episodes. But this has been really fun. So
until next time, raise that glass to inspiration. Cheers.
I was talking about Moses today, and I'm talking about him asking God to show him his full glory and all that stuff, and I said, but he told him he couldn't, as he'd kill him. So he just mooned him instead. And they were like, no, don't say that. It was his back. It's not his backside. His butt, right? No.
That's when people get out their Bible like,
Just in case this makes the cut. That was from the pulpit.